They say civilization is the triumph of reason over savagery. But what if, beneath the glittering temples and golden masks of one of the greatest ancient empires, there pulsed a heart that beat only for blood? High atop the stone pyramids of the Aztec world, the sun burned red, not just with the light of dawn, but with the smoke of human sacrifice. Drums thundered through the Valley of Mexico, echoing across jungles and lakes. Thousands of people gathered below, their eyes lifted to a scene of both divine worship and unimaginable horror. A priest, his face painted black, raised an obsidian blade to the sky. A victim, alive and trembling, was laid upon the sacrificial stone. In one swift motion, the blade plunged down, and a heart still beating was lifted high to the sun god, Huitzilopochtli. Blood spilled down the steps of the pyramid, painting them crimson. To the Aztecs, this was not cruelty. It was balance. To them, the gods had sacrificed themselves to create the world, and humans owed the same in return. Without sacrifice, the sun would not rise. The earth would not yield its crops. Time itself would collapse into darkness. This was not mythology to them, it was cosmic duty. And for centuries, the priests of Tenochtitlán carried out this terrifying responsibility with unwavering devotion and precision. But what do these rituals really tell us about the human condition? Were the Aztecs truly monsters of blood and death? Or were they in some twisted way trying to understand the universe through sacrifice? In this episode, we will journey into the sacred temples of the Aztecs, uncover the logic behind their brutal rituals, and explore the haunting question: what price were they truly willing to pay to keep the gods alive?
To understand the Aztec rituals of blood and sacrifice, we must first step into the heart of their world, the Valley of Mexico, a vast basin surrounded by mountains where the city of Tenochtitlan rose like a vision from another realm. Founded around 1325 CE on an island in Lake Texcoco, Tenochtitlan was not just a city, it was a living symbol of cosmic order. Its streets were aligned with the stars, its temples mirrored the heavens, and at its core stood the Templo Mayor, the great pyramid dedicated to two gods, Huitzilopochtli, the sun and war god, and Tlaloc, the god of rain and fertility. Archaeologists have unearthed astonishing evidence from this site. Thousands of human bones, obsidian blades still stained with microscopic traces of blood, and murals depicting hearts, skulls, and serpents intertwined. Each finding reaffirms what the early Spanish chroniclers wrote with both awe and disgust, that the Aztecs believed the very survival of the universe depended on ritual sacrifice. But this practice didn't begin with the Aztecs. It stretched back thousands of years to earlier Mesoamerican civilizations like the Olmec, Zapotec, and Maya. For them, the act of offering blood was a way to feed the gods and maintain the balance of the cosmos. Blood was divine energy, the liquid of life. The Aztecs merely perfected, or perhaps distorted, this ancient custom into something grander and more terrifying. According to Aztec cosmology, the universe had been destroyed and reborn multiple times. We now live in the fifth sun, a fragile age that could end at any moment. The gods had sacrificed themselves to ignite this sun, and humanity owed them an eternal debt of blood to keep it burning. Every beating heart ripped from a chest, every drop of blood spilled on the temple stones was an act of cosmic renewal. In the eyes of the priests, sacrifice wasn't cruelty, it was gratitude. The role of the priests. The Aztec priesthood was a vast, structured, and sacred institution. These were not simple fanatics. They were astronomers, mathematicians, and philosophers wrapped in ritual garments. They studied the stars, the agricultural cycles, and the complex Aztec calendar, a combination of the Xiopawali and Tonalpawali cycles. They believed time itself was alive, a divine force that had to be nourished. If the sacred count of days was not honored through ceremony, chaos would return. Priests fasted for days, abstained from worldly pleasures, and performed self-sacrifice by piercing their tongues and ears with obsidian thorns. Their blood was an offering of humility before the gods, a smaller echo of the greater sacrifices they performed on others. When the time came for large ceremonies, particularly during the feast of Toxcat, Lakashipawastli, or the new fire ceremony, the entire city transformed into a living ritual. Captured warriors, chosen slaves, and even volunteers were dressed as gods, feasted and revered before being sacrificed. Their deaths were seen as transformations, the moment a mortal merged with divinity. The scale of the sacrifice. Spanish conquistadors such as Bernal Díaz del Castillo and Hernán Cortés wrote accounts describing sacrifices on an unimaginable scale. One of the most infamous events occurred in 1487 during the dedication of the new great temple of Tenochtitlán. Chroniclers claimed that over 20,000 victims were sacrificed over several days, their bodies tumbling down the pyramid steps like an unending river of blood. Modern historians debate these numbers. Some believe they were exaggerated for shock value, but archaeological evidence still confirms mass sacrifices did occur. Skulls displayed in Zompantli racks, discovered near the Templo Mayor, number in the tens of thousands. Researchers at Mexico's National Institute for Anthropology and History, or NIAH, found the remains of men, women, and children, not only warriors but civilians, sacrificed to appease different gods. Each deity required specific offerings. Tlaloc, god of rain, received the tears of children, sometimes produced through fear before sacrifice, as rain was seen as their weeping. Huitzilopochtli, the sun god, demanded the hearts of captured warriors, their strength believed to sustain the sun's journey. Xipetotec, the flayed god of renewal, required victims to be skinned alive, symbolizing the shedding of the old season to birth the new. This precision, this systematic devotion to cosmic balance through horror, fascinates and disturbs archaeologists to this day. The encounter with the Spanish. When the Spanish arrived in 1519, led by Cortés, they were both horrified and enthralled by the scale of Aztec religion. To them, these sacrifices were proof of demonic influence, a justification for conquest and conversion. Yet beneath their fear, there was something else, a mirror. Because the Spanish too waged holy wars. They too believed in divine bloodshed, the Crusades, the Inquisition. The difference was only in the symbols. As the Spanish destroyed temples and burned codices, much of Aztec knowledge was lost forever. Yet through archaeology, we are piecing together what the flames could not erase. A worldview in which every life and death was part of a grand cosmic equation. In the modern world, the Aztec rituals seem monstrous, even alien, but they force us to confront an uncomfortable truth. Across cultures and eras, humanity has always sought meaning through sacrifice, whether through blood, faith, or devotion. And so the deeper question remains. Were the Aztec priests truly servants of darkness, or simply keepers of an ancient logic, one that saw divinity reflected in death itself?
The theater of blood, inside the Aztec rituals. Imagine standing in the shadow of the Templo Mayor as dawn breaks. The air is heavy with incense, the scent of copal rising toward the heavens like a bridge between worlds. Drums begin to pound, slow at first, then faster, syncing with the rhythm of hundreds of human hearts gathered below. The chants of priests echo against the stone walls, their voices deep and otherworldly. This is not chaos. It is choreography, a divine performance that has been rehearsed for centuries. Every motion, every drumbeat, every cut of the blade is guided by cosmic order. The ritual of the heart. The most iconic and feared of all Aztec ceremonies was the heart sacrifice, known as Tlakamictilitzli, the killing of man. At the peak of the pyramid, 4 priests held the victim's limbs firmly against the stone slab. The chief priest, known as the Tekua, wielded an obsidian knife sharp enough to cut through flesh and bone in a single motion. With a swift, practiced strike, he pierced the chest, reached inside, and lifted out the heart, still beating, glistening with life. The priest then raised it to the sky as an offering to Huitzilopochtli, the god of the sun and war. The heart represented the tonali, or divine energy, believed to be the essence of the person, their soul and courage combined. As the heart's last beats faded, the body was cast down the steps of the temple, rolling until it reached the courtyard below, where attendants would collect it for burial, dismemberment, or ritual display. To us, this might seem like a scene from a nightmare, but to the Aztecs, it was the most sacred of all acts, the giving of life to sustain life itself. The heart was not destroyed, it was returned to the gods who had once given it. The festival of Xipe-Totec, the flayed god. Perhaps the most disturbing of all rituals was the festival dedicated to Xipe-Totec, our Lord, the Flayed One. Xipe-Totec symbolized renewal, fertility, and transformation. Just as snakes shed their skin or the earth renews itself after harvest. During his festival, Tlacaxipewalitzli, victims were sacrificed and then flayed alive. Their skins, representing the old layer of decay, were worn by priests and young warriors for 20 days. The sight was both terrifying and mesmerizing. Human figures draped in flesh, walking the streets, blessing farmers, symbolizing rebirth. Modern archaeologists have found stone carvings of flayed figures and ritual masks made of human skin, carefully preserved in temple caches. These artifacts are chilling reminders of how the Aztecs merged horror with holiness. The skin was not seen as desecration, but as transformation. The deceased reborn as divine. In their worldview, death was not the end, but a portal to the next cycle of existence. The new fire ceremony. Resetting the universe. Every 52 years, the Aztec calendar completed a full cycle, an event that terrified even the priests. They called it the binding of the years. On that night, all fires across the empire were extinguished. The world plunged into total darkness. People broke their pots, destroyed furniture, and waited in silence, believing that the world might end, that the sun might not rise again. At midnight, high atop a sacred hill near Tenochtitlan, priests lit a new fire inside the chest of a sacrificial victim. If the flame caught, if the fire burned brightly, it meant the gods had accepted humanity's offering. The priests then lit torches from that flame and carried them throughout the land, reigniting every hearth, every temple, every home. To the Aztecs, this was not just a ritual, it was cosmic resurrection. The world itself was reborn through one act of divine violence. War as a sacred duty. What fueled this cycle of sacrifice was not hatred, but cosmic necessity. The Aztecs waged flower wars, Xochiayohuatl, not to conquer land or wealth, but to capture prisoners for sacrifice. In these ritual battles, enemy warriors were not slaughtered in combat. They were taken alive, honored, and later offered to the gods. To die on the sacrificial stone was not shameful. It was a sacred destiny. One captured warrior, before his death, was often dressed as a god, fed royal meals, and adored by crowds. His final walk up the pyramid steps was called the Tenochtitlan, the embodiment of a god. In those last moments, he became divine. This concept of sacrifice was deeply tied to Aztec philosophy, the idea that all life exists through duality, creation and destruction, order and chaos, life and death. One cannot exist without the other. To kill was to create. To die was to give life. In this sense, the Aztecs were not sadists. They were philosophers of blood. The archaeological echoes. Archaeological excavations around Mexico City have given modern science a window into these beliefs. In 2015, beneath the ruins of the Templo Mayor, archaeologists discovered a massive tower made entirely of human skulls, the Huayed Zompantli. Over 600 skulls were found embedded in lime mortar, arranged in perfect symmetry. Forensic analysis showed that many belonged to young men, but also women and children. Dr. Raul Barrera, one of the leading archaeologists, noted, "The skulls were not trophies of war, they were offerings. Each face once represented a prayer, a connection between mortals and gods." When the Spanish chroniclers saw this site, they called it barbaric. But to the Aztecs, it was a monument of faith, a reminder that the universe was nourished by sacrifice, just as the earth is nourished by rain. The cosmic equation. The Aztecs believed they lived in a precarious world, where cosmic forces were constantly at war, light against darkness, life against death. And the only way to maintain balance was through reciprocity, humans giving back what the gods once gave to them. This worldview is remarkably consistent with other ancient civilizations, from the Egyptians, who offered food to their gods, to the Maya, who spilled royal blood through self-sacrifice. But nowhere else in history was this belief so complete, so institutionalized, as it was in the Aztec Empire. Every ritual, every drop of blood, every life taken, all served a single purpose: to keep the fifth sun alive. As we stand before the ruins of the Templo Mayor today, it's hard not to feel a strange mix of awe and dread. The stones whisper of devotion so profound that it transcended morality. And perhaps that's the greatest paradox of all, that in their pursuit of cosmic harmony, the Aztecs revealed both the heights and the depths of the human spirit.
Faith, fear, and the machinery of the gods. The image of the Aztec priest, face painted in soot, robe stained with blood, holding a still-beating heart to the sun, has haunted our collective imagination for centuries. But beneath that image lies a deeper question. Did the Aztecs truly understand what they were doing, or were they trapped within a cosmic story too vast and terrifying to escape? The philosophy of blood. To understand Aztec ritual, we must first understand Aztec thought. Unlike Western religions that separate the sacred and the profane, the Aztecs believed that everything was sacred. Every breath, every death, every grain of maize existed within a living cycle of divine energy. This concept was known as Teotl. Teotl was not a god in the personal sense. It was the force of existence itself. The gods, the stars, the rain, the humans, all were different forms of Teotl, endlessly transforming from one to another. To keep that force in motion, energy had to circulate, and the purest energy in the universe was blood, the essence of life. Thus, sacrifice was not murder. It was a transfer of energy, a sacred transaction between mortal and divine. In a way, the Aztec Empire functioned like a vast cosmic machine. Every festival, every war, every ritual ensuring that Teotl kept flowing, that the fifth sun would not collapse into darkness. The role of fear and control. Yet there was another layer to this devotion, one rooted not in divinity, but in power. Religion in Aztec society was inseparable from politics.
The emperor himself was seen as the earthly representative of the gods, the Hui Tlatoni, literally the great speaker. His rule depended on maintaining divine order, and divine order required blood. By orchestrating immense public sacrifices, the state created an awe so profound it became obedience. Tens of thousands of citizens would gather to watch priests ascend the pyramid steps, their chants echoing over the valley, their blades flashing in the sun. The spectacle reinforced the cosmic message. Without the priests, without the emperor, the sun would die. It was spiritual governance, rule through cosmic fear. The people didn't rebel because rebellion wasn't merely treason, it was the end of the world. Debates among historians and archaeologists. Modern historians and archaeologists continue to debate the scale and meaning of Aztec sacrifice. Some scholars, like Inga Clendenin, argue that the rituals were theatrical acts of awe, less about death itself and more about the symbolism of cosmic renewal. Others, such as Michael Harner, claim the practice was tied to pragmatic necessity, a population control mechanism, or even ritualized cannibalism in times of famine. Excavations at the Templo Mayor have revealed both religious artifacts and traces of ceremonial feasts that followed large sacrifices. Some bones show cut marks consistent with butchery, suggesting the possibility that parts of the victims were consumed in ceremonial meals. If this is true, it redefines the meaning of sacrifice, not only as a spiritual offering, but as an act of incorporation, consuming the divine essence of the sacrificed to internalize their power. However, others argue that such interpretations risk sensationalism. Anthropologist Eduardo Matos Moctezuma cautions that we must not judge Aztec rituals by modern moral standards. For them, the act of sacrifice was sacred duty, not cruelty. It was the way to maintain cosmic harmony. Echoes across civilizations. The Aztecs were not alone in linking blood with divinity. Across the ancient world, similar patterns emerge, though none so extreme. In ancient Egypt, offerings to Ra ensured the sun's journey. Among the Inca, children were sacrificed atop Andean peaks to appease the mountain spirits. In ancient Mesopotamia, temples received animal sacrifices to sustain the god's favor. But what makes the Aztecs unique is the systematization of death, the transformation of sacrifice into a state ritual, executed with precision and grandeur. They built an empire on theology, a fusion of cosmic duty and imperial control that made their civilization one of the most organized yet most terrifying in human history. The fall of the Sun Empire. When the Spanish arrived in 1519, led by Hernán Cortés, they encountered a society that seemed both divine and demonic. The streets of Tenochtitlan gleamed with white stone, floating gardens, and gold-covered temples, a metropolis rivaling any in Europe. But on the temple steps, they saw what they could not comprehend. Human hearts torn from chests, blood flowing like rivers, skulls impaled on racks. For the conquistadors, this was evidence of satanic evil, but for the Aztecs, the Spaniards were simply the next cycle, the new gods arriving to test humanity once again. Some priests believed Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent, had returned in human form, a prophecy that may have weakened their resistance to the invaders. Ironically, the very faith that once unified their empire also hastened its collapse. In 1521, Tenochtitlan fell. The temples were destroyed, the idols shattered, the priests executed. The fires of the gods were extinguished not by cosmic darkness, but by cannon smoke and disease. And yet, even in ruins, their worldview endured, buried beneath the modern streets of Mexico City, waiting to be rediscovered by archaeology. Modern rediscovery. Today, the ruins of Templo Mayor sit at the heart of Mexico City, beside colonial cathedrals built directly atop the Aztec sacred precinct. When excavations began in the late 19th century, archaeologists unearthed thousands of offerings, jade masks, obsidian knives, shells from distant oceans, and bones from countless victims. Each discovery reopened a conversation. Were these people savages or visionaries trapped in a cosmic logic beyond our understanding? In 2017, a monumental find changed everything. A circular tower of skulls, the Huitzilopochtli, revealing not just warriors, but women and children among the sacrificed. This shattered the assumption that sacrifice was only about war. It was about cosmic inclusivity, the idea that every being had a role to play in sustaining the universe. As Dr. Rodrigo Bolanos of the INAH observed, these were not trophies, they were symbols of continuity. The Aztecs didn't kill for cruelty, they offered life for life. The eternal question. Perhaps the most haunting aspect of the Aztec worldview is that it mirrors something eternal in the human psyche. Our longing for meaning, our fear of oblivion, our need to believe that suffering has purpose. In their blood-soaked ceremonies, the Aztecs sought to give structure to chaos. Their sacrifices, however horrifying, were expressions of faith. Faith that death itself could be transformed into creation. And when we strip away the horror, the question remains timeless. Are we too still sacrificing in our own way? Perhaps not with knives and pyramids, but through the endless cycles of war, greed, and ambition, all in the name of something we call progress. The Aztecs may be gone, but their logic, the belief that life demands payment, still flows quietly beneath the surface of human civilization.
The blood we still spill. Lessons from the Aztec world. When we look back at the Aztec priests standing on their pyramids, blades in hand, hearts offered to the sky, it's easy to feel moral superiority. We tell ourselves we are civilized now. We no longer sacrifice humans to appease gods. We no longer let fear rule our faith. But what if the real question is not whether we've changed, but whether we've simply changed the form of our sacrifices? The modern echoes of ancient blood. The Aztec Empire may have fallen 500 years ago, but their underlying logic, the idea that survival demands offering something precious, has never left humanity. Think about it. We still sacrifice people for systems we claim to serve. Young men and women die in wars fought for peace. Workers sacrifice health, time, and relationships for money. Society sacrifice forests and oceans to feed economies. The gods have changed their names from Huitzilopochtli to progress, from Tlaloc to prophet, but they still demand offerings. In ancient times, the Aztec priests raised obsidian blades toward the sun. Today, our blades are invisible. Policies, pollution, ambition, greed. And yet, they cut just as deeply. When archaeologists uncovered the skull towers of the Aztecs, they see evidence of faith turned into machinery. But in the future, when someone excavates the ruins of our own civilization, what will they see? Perhaps mountains of plastic, poisoned rivers, collapsing ecosystems, proof that we too once worshipped something that devoured us. Rituals of fear and power. The Aztecs maintained their empire through ritualized fear, the belief that the world would end if the people disobeyed divine law. In our world, fear still drives the machine. Fear of failure, fear of poverty, fear of insignificance. We offer ourselves to the systems that promise safety, meaning, or eternal progress, even when those systems demand our time, our freedom, or our conscience. We watch screens instead of skies, algorithms instead of gods. Our temples are skyscrapers. Our priests are politicians, CEOs, and influencers who shape belief with data instead of prophecy.
We are still human, still searching for control in a universe that often feels indifferent. And when faced with chaos, we still reach for the same ancient instinct: make an offering so the world keeps spinning. The duality of creation and destruction. The Aztecs understood something profound, something we often forget in our sanitized modernity. Creation and destruction are not opposites, they are partners. To plant a seed, the soil must be broken. To build a city, the forest must fall. To evolve, something old must die. The difference lies in awareness. The Aztecs faced the violence of existence head-on. They ritualized it, gave it meaning, and looked it in the eye. We, on the other hand, often hide ours behind convenience and distance. We let others suffer far away so that our lives can remain comfortable. In some dark way, the Aztec priests were more honest. They acknowledged that every sunrise is bought with death, whether it's a deer in the hunt, a soldier on the battlefield, or a human heart on the stone. Their rituals were horrific, yes, but they were also symbolic confessions of what life demands. The lesson of reciprocity. At the core of Aztec belief was the concept of reciprocity. The gods gave their blood to create humanity, and in return, humanity must give back. This is not a barbaric idea, it's ecological truth. Every system survives through exchange. Every organism feeds another. Every civilization depends on the Earth's gifts. What doomed the Aztecs was not the idea of giving back, it was the imbalance. They gave too much blood to sustain too much power. Their rituals grew larger, more theatrical, more political, until the act of offering life lost its meaning and became spectacle. And perhaps this is where our world stands now. We too live in an imbalance, consuming more than we return, taking without gratitude, building temples of progress that rise upon the bones of our planet. If the Aztecs gave too much blood, maybe our sin is offering too little reverence. Reclaiming the sacred. To truly learn from the Aztecs, we must not only condemn their horror, but also reclaim their sense of the sacred cycle. They saw every heartbeat as part of the universe's rhythm. Every life, no matter how small, was a thread in the fabric of existence. In our time, spirituality often feels detached from nature. We've separated faith from the earth and reason from reverence. But perhaps, if we can see the divine not in temples or gods, but in rivers, forests, and the fragile breath of all living things, we can honor the same truth the Aztecs sought, without the cruelty their fear demanded. Because what they were really trying to say, in their language of blood and smoke, was this: life only continues when we give back. That is not just religion, it's survival. Humanity's eternal mirror. The story of the Aztec priests forces us to confront our own nature. It reminds us that beneath our modern technologies and enlightened philosophies, we are still ancient beings, driven by ritual, bound by myth, and haunted by the need to matter. Maybe the horror we feel when we imagine the sacrifices atop the Great Pyramid is not disgust at something alien, but recognition of something familiar. Because deep down, we all know the truth the Aztecs faced, that life is both a gift and a debt. And the way we pay that debt defines what kind of civilization we are. Will we keep feeding invisible gods until we destroy ourselves? Or can we learn to honor the sacred without spilling more blood, real or symbolic? A reflection for today. The Aztecs believed the sun would stop rising without human sacrifice. We now know the sun doesn't need our blood to burn, but perhaps the light of humanity, our compassion, our wisdom, our balance, does. Maybe our sacrifices today should be different. Not lives, but egos. Not hearts, but habits. Not blood, but ignorance. If the Aztecs gave too much of themselves to the gods, perhaps our era's challenge is to give enough of ourselves to each other.
Because in the end, civilizations don't fall because the gods abandon them. They fall because they forget the sacred truth that every act, every offering, every choice shapes the world that comes after.
The sun still rises. The Aztec pyramids stand silent now. The drums have faded, the chants are gone. Yet, if you walk through the ruins of Tenochtitlan, beneath the skyscrapers and traffic of modern Mexico City, you can still feel it. That strange pulse beneath the ground, the heartbeat of a world that once believed the universe ran on blood. The stones remember. They remembered the priests who gazed at the stars and saw destiny written in fire. They remembered the captives who climbed the temple steps trembling, knowing that their deaths would keep the sun alive. They remember an empire that sought to understand existence through ritual, through pain, through awe. And perhaps, in their own way, they succeeded. Because what the Aztecs built was not just a religion, it was a philosophy, a worldview that recognized the truth we often deny, that life feeds on life, and creation demands sacrifice. Their tragedy was not in believing this truth, but in taking it to the edge of madness, the price of meaning. Every civilization, no matter how advanced, must face the same eternal question. What are we willing to give to keep our world alive? For the Aztecs, the answer was blood. For us, it might be something else, our time, our compassion, our willingness to change. When archaeologists uncover the skull towers of the Aztecs, they find horror. But they also find devotion, discipline, and a desperate hope that the cosmos could be understood. And isn't that, in some sense, what drives us all? We build monuments, create art, send probes into space, not because we must, but because we need to believe that our existence matters. The Aztecs believed their sacrifices fueled the sun. We believe our discoveries fuel progress. The difference is not in the act, but in the faith behind it. The mirror of humanity. The story of the Aztec priests is not just a story of the past, it's a mirror for the present. It shows us what happens when belief becomes absolute, when fear masquerades as devotion, when power disguises itself as faith. It warns us that even noble intentions, to sustain the universe, to honor the divine, can become monstrous when stripped of balance and compassion. But it also reminds us that the search for meaning is what makes us human. The Aztecs looked to the heavens and tried to give something back. And in that longing, in that desperate attempt to connect the mortal with the divine, they revealed both the light and darkness of the human soul, the eternal flame. As the sun sets over the Valley of Mexico, its rays touch the ancient stones of the Templo Mayor. The same sun that the Aztecs once feared would die without sacrifice still burns, indifferent yet constant. And maybe that's the final lesson. The universe doesn't need our blood. It doesn't demand our suffering, but it does respond to our reverence, to how we treat one another, and the world that sustains us. So when we look back at the Aztecs, let us not only see their horror, but their hunger for connection, their courage to face the cosmos, their attempt to give meaning to existence itself. Because we too are builders of temples, whether of stone or of thought. We too perform rituals every day, hoping to keep our own suns alive. The question is, what kind of offerings are we making? Are they born of fear or of understanding? And so, as the flames of history flicker across the ruins of Tenochtitlan, one truth remains. Civilizations rise and fall, but the search for meaning,
The need to explain why we live and why we die endures. The Aztec priests may be gone, their altars may be dust, but the echo of their question still burns within us all. What will humanity sacrifice next to keep the light alive? If you've made it this far into our journey through time, thank you. The story of the Aztecs is not only about death, but about what it means to be alive. If you want to keep exploring the mysteries of our past, from prehistoric humans to forgotten civilizations, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you won't miss the next discovery. Because the past isn't dead, it's waiting, beneath our feet, beneath our myths, and perhaps beneath our very hearts.